a little bit about me. First, I work in a company called Appcampus, which is a joint program by Microsoft, Nokia, and Aalto University. What we are doing is we are funding Windows Phone application development. I work there as a guru, so my domain is to make sure that all of the teams that get money from us get all of their technical problems solved, and that all of the developers around the world know about us. Then I was chosen as a Windows Azure insider. So I've been sharing my knowledge about Windows Azure before. And then I'm a CEO founder of Young Developers Finland, which is an organization which aims to educate young people to become professional developers. Then I'm also currently acting as a Microsoft student partner, so sharing knowledge in my own school. So today we are going to talk about Windows Azure Mobile Services. We are going to talk about all of the major blocks that it's used to be building for it. So we are talking about the data, server logic and scripting, scheduler, authentication, and push notification. So Windows Azure Mobile Services is a SaaS. So you buy it as a service. You get lots of things out of the box. You get authentication, you get data, you get logging, you get diagnostics, you get lots of the things. And now we're going to dive it a little bit deeper. So a little bit about the data. So how is the data stored on Windows Azure Mobile Services? It's a normal SQL database. There is no fancy NoSQL or anything else. It's a normal Azure SQL database. You can use all of the normal tools to access the database. Either the command line tools, SQL Management Studio, SQL Azure Portal, or whichever tool you prefer. Then, of course, there is REST APIs. So if you want to access it more from web, those are also open. Then there is something called dynamic schema, which makes development a lot easier while you're on rapid development phases. So instead of whenever you want to change a schema of your database, instead of always going to the database management tool, changing the schema there, you can just change it from your C# code or JavaScript code or whichever platform you're using, and the service will automatically change the schema based on the data that you're storing. You can also turn it off, because when you're doing production code, you might not want someone else to modify the schema of your database. So, I'm going to now go through how to get started with this. So this is a Windows Azure portal, windowsazure.com, and I'm logging in. And what is going to open is the normal portal view. On the left, you're seeing all of the different kinds of modules and blocks that you can use. But we are mainly interested in the Windows Azure Mobile Services. And I'm going to just create a new to show you how to do it. So let's call it Tech Days Finland Demo. And it's asking you, do you want to use existing SQL database or do you want to use a new one? I will use an existing one. And then it's checking that your password is correct. And now it's going to create it. Creating the new mobile services takes about 30 seconds to 1 minute. And after that, you're already ready to go. That's everything that you need to do to get the service enabled. Currently, the service is in preview mode, and they're offering 10 free instances that you can run for free until it's going to be released. After released, they're probably going to limit it to the 5, but currently it's 10. And now the service is up. So by the default, there is a ready-made templates or SDKs for 4 different platforms. So Windows Phone 8, Windows 8, iOS, and the newest one, Android. So all of them are ready right away to be able to develop for them. So I'm going to do the Windows Store one. So I just click here. I have the tools installed. And then I'm saying that create a table. So what this do is that it creates a table to my data view so that I can then use it for my application. I'm now going to download the source code. You can choose between C# and JavaScript, whichever you prefer to. They both behave exactly same way. So it's giving you one zip file that contains all of the codes. It contains your key. It contains all of the necessary parts to get it working. So if we open it, it's got all of the basic layout, all of the basic codes already there, and we can just start debugging the application. And this is the same demo that you saw before. So it's basically letting you to insert to-do items on the table. So let's say I need to do presentation. Yep. Whenever I click save, it will save it directly to the cloud. And after a moment, you will see that it appears on the right side. Then there is a refresh, which you can use to refresh it manually if you haven't added stuff yourself, but someone else has added it. So let's add another one, just to demo it a bit. Then let's go back to the portal. On the portal, on the top, we have few sections. So one is called dashboard, which will basically show you how your service is currently doing. And because it's relatively new, because I just created it, it's not showing any data. But what it's showing is that all of the limits that I have on the free instance. So on the free instance, you get already 3 hours a day of computing power, which you will almost never hit with a small usage. Then you will get data out and memory usage limits. But you can always check how you're facing those limits on this page. Then on the right, you can see the URL of your service. If you open it with the website, you'll get the basic eyes open page. But there is nothing interesting there. So then it tells you where it is, dynamic schema is enabled. But what we're interested now is the data. So the button on the first one where we chose create to-do table, the only thing that it did was create a new table to this view. It created the to-do item table. And you can just as easily create it from this view. So for example, if we now want to create to-do item 2, I could just just click it and it would be done. And of course you can also choose different kind of authentications. So you can always say that anybody can access the data. Then of course that only scripts can access it. Only authenticated users can access it. And then anybody with your key. The default one is that anybody with a key that was generated for you can access the data. But you can also enable it so that anyone can access it if you for some reason wants to limit it so that everyone can access some kind of data, everyone with a key can access the second level of the data, and anyone with authentication can access the third level of the data. So if you have very simple permission levels, you can enable it right from here. You don't need to do any coding, which is pretty cool. But I'm going to leave it like that and just create a new table. By default, the table is of course empty. And by default, you can go to look the columns, and you can see that it only has one column, call it ID, which is always there. You cannot delete it, and it must always be there, so it's the ID. But if you go back here and choose the other one, where we already entered some data, you can see that there is now the schema has been updated according to what we had on the code. So by the default, the C# example got the class here. So it's very simple class. And now if you want to enable changes to the schema, you can do it easily by just writing a new members here. Let's say name. So you can easily edit the schema just by changing the code from the C# side. So you don't need to do anything else. Of course, whenever you are loading the data, if you have different kind of the data on the table, you need to figure out, hey, okay, I think normally the name cannot be null, but on the older ones, it can't be null because it didn't exist on the start. So that kind of cases you need to handle yourself. But now if we add an item and save it, sorry, the network a little bit bugged, so let's skip that one. So basically that will enable the schema update. Sometimes if you're not sure, it can, if you have any network problems, and depending on which case you're doing the insert, it can create a bug so that it doesn't update the schema and tries to upload the new one. Then a little bit about the server logic. So by default, it creates 4 points where you can add your own code. So whenever any data is create, read, update, and delete. Some people use instead of create, insert, because it's more like telling the naming. So whenever you're inserting data, you can do some kind of coding, for example, add a timestamp. So instead of the client setting a timestamp, you can add the timestamp on the server side, which makes it always be the server time, and you don't need to worry about someone tampering the data from the client side. Also, whenever someone is reading the data, at that point you can need to either check permissions, you can check that the data is valid, or whatever checks you want to do. Also on delete point, you can always, for example, send confirmation emails or confirmation messages that are you sure you want to delete this data, or that someone tried to delete this data, do you want to allow it? So that kind of scenarios are very, very easy to do with this service. Then of course, updating the data, if you want to update it, you can also do that. So then scheduler. How many of you saw the scheduler sample today? Great, at least few people. So with the scheduler, you can create very nice cron jobs, basically, that run every now and then. You can decide it. The minimum time is 15 minutes. The maximum time is something like 12 months. For example, a good example is you want to retrieve Twitter feeds every 15 minutes to keep up a Twitter log for some reason. Or you want to retrieve all of the posts from the Facebook page. Or maybe you want to nightly go through all of your customers, check what's the balance of their accounts, and send them emails or warnings based on those amounts. So whatever cron jobs schedules you want to have, you can do it with scheduler. So I'm just going to show you that, for example, in the to-do item, we have the simple 4 places. So insert, update, delete, and read. And if you add the code before the request execute, then it will of course do it before the data is saved or data is affected. So you could add whatever you want here. Some people think that this is bad for that reason that this is in JavaScript. Some people would prefer C#. But the reason why it's on JavaScript is that the service is built with Node.js, and the service is built for people who don't know or who don't want to learn how to use backend and create it with C#. And those people, there's lots of those people who know HTML5 and they know JavaScript. So they are in a home when you can write the server-side scripts on a JavaScript. Also, there is already a huge amount of samples how to do different kind of stuff from this JavaScript engine. For example, currently push notifications, getting the newest Twitter feeds, getting the Facebook post, whatever you think of can be done from here. Of course, if you want to create a huge, let's say, calculating weather or that kind of data, I don't suggest doing it on the JavaScript side. If you want to do heavy calculation, you can enable Windows Azure Cloud Service, do the calculation there, and then just update the normal SQL database of mobile services with the results, instead of just putting all of the code into JavaScript. So it's pretty easy to link the mobile services with any other Windows Azure blocks you're using. Then let's take a quick look how the scheduler looks like. So I'm going to create a new scheduler task. And it asks me two options. So do I want to run it every point of time? So 15 minutes is the minimum. Or do I want to run it on demand? An example for the on-demand command is that if I want to create a script that's used for example cleaning my databases, I don't want it to run randomly. But when I want to run it, I want to make sure that it's always doing the same things. It's doing it with logging, and I don't want to copy-paste the script from somewhere. I just want to go here and say, run it. So I'm going to create an example how to do it. So I name it clean database. And because now it's currently on demand, you can also, of course, change this whenever you want. But whenever it's on demand, you can always go here and just say, run this. And then it will run it. But it will not run it ever unless you go to the portal and click run it, which is a pretty nice feature if you want to do. So at here I could just say run once and it would run it. Then a little bit about the authentication. Currently, major two things. Well, there is a few things that on the authentication level. So out of the box, it supports Windows Live, it supports Twitter, it supports Facebook and Google accounts. And all of them are very easy to create and use. And as you saw, you can create a table level authorization access without doing any code. So you can say that authenticated users can read the data, but unauthenticated users cannot read the data. Or you can say that authenticated users can update the data and insert the data, but unauthenticated users can read the data without one line of code. If you want to do a more permission levels, for example, saying only this user can update the data, then you need to write it to the server-side script on whichever CRUD element you wanted to do it. So if you want to limit access of creating the data, you need to go and add the code to create data position on that table. So if I want to say at here, you can just choose that insert permission is everyone, but updating the permission is only the authenticated users. You save it, and now it's already ready-made for the authentication. So now, how to enable the authentication itself? There is a tab called Identity, which got all of the 4 services currently. So Microsoft accounts, Facebook, Twitter, and Google. And there is an instructions how to do it on the first page of the service. So how to get this first page, which opened when you created it, is the blue cloud icon on the left. So here is an example. For example, I want to do Windows Store application. I want to add authentication into it. So here is step-by-step guide how to do it. For example, I will now add a Facebook authentication to this. I will not go through all of the steps. I will just quickly demo that by going through this tutorial, you can create this in like 5 minutes very, very easily. So you're going to there is all of the links are there, and you just need to copy and paste your application IDs into the Windows Azure portal. So I have a Facebook application. Its name is Have I Met You? I will need to first start with editing the application and telling it what is my service URL address. And my service URL address is TechDays Finland Demo Azure Mobile Azure/MobileNet. So I will just take it here, put it here, and click Save Changes. And then the other thing is that I need to do is copy paste my application ID and my application secret into the identity tab of my service. So now what it does is that whenever I start my application, it will go to the Windows Azure Mobile Services, which will redirect the user into the Facebook. When you log in into the Facebook will send the data into the Windows Azure Mobile Services, which will then give you the token. So the idea is that it's very simple to do, and after this, you can ask more permissions from the user. For example, I could ask that I would get all of the basic information of the user, whoever logged onto Facebook. So whenever he does a write command, and extra to that, it writes whatever data you were writing. It would also take your Facebook name or your Facebook ID and store that also to the data table. So that then I would be very easily able to track who made that change. So, taking the keys. And then all of the code that you need to add is already ready-made on the samples. So the only thing that you need to do is copy-paste the few lines of code to wherever you want it, and then basically just resolve the usings. And sorry. Yep. So change one other thing. So whenever you navigate to this application, this will now automatically start with that process that the user needs to log in to the service right away when they start it. So now when I start my application, it will open me the Facebook login window, which will basically now authenticate the user based on the Facebook. So let's do it. So now it says that what's my Facebook ID. You could also retrieve other things like Facebook name, email addresses, or phone numbers if those are stored there. Whatever data you have on Facebook could now be linked to my application. So it's a pretty nice way to do the authentication. And now if I would say that only authenticated users can fetch the data, without if you click cancel on the first view, you couldn't retrieve the data anymore. Let's stop the debugging and go back to the slides. So a little bit about the notifications. So if you want to create notifications for any of the supported platforms, it's very, very easy to do. So first of all, you need to retrieve the keys. There are some tutorials how to do it. And after that, whenever you have any tasks, so maybe create, delete, update, or insert, delete, and then whenever you do schedule a task, at all of those points, you can very, very easily create a notification to those users. Of course, you need to create a logic to store all of the needed information. For example, on the Windows Phone, you need to store the channel URI, which you then use to send the notification. Then one thing that's always a little bit mystery to most of the people is that this is meant to be used for small applications. No. This service can be used to as huge application as you have. So it's scaling up, it's scaling up and it's scaling out. So you can scale it as much as you want if you are needing more service for some reasons. So let's start with the scaling part. So when you are on the mobile service, there's a scale function. By default, it's using the free one. And on the free, there is the limitations. And if you want to get more access, more power, more speed, more memory, then you can choose to the research. After you have chosen the research, you can even go up to the 10 instances by default, and you can go even higher if there is a need to. But also at the same time, it's telling you the warning that are you sure that you want to do it? Because this will cost you money. The other thing that you might need to scale up is the database. By default, this database is a normal Azure SQL database and web edition of it with 1 GB of space. So if you know that you are going to have a bigger database, you can stick with the web edition and upgrade it to the 5 GB. Or you can choose to go to the business and upgrade it to way, way bigger. So this is not meant to be only a small service. It's meant to be a full-fledged backend for all of your mobile needs. I'm now going away to this page to not save them. So, then about the push notifications. So, out of the box, it enables you to do Windows application, so Windows 8 notifications. Then it enables you to do Apple and Google. The ways to enable the notifications vary between the platforms. So even though you might not be yourself using a Google account, you probably want to enable your users to use Google push notifications, if that's the case what you want to support. All of the tutorials how to enable the push notifications can be found on the first page. On the Windows Phone, it's pretty straightforward, but you need to publish the application to the store, so I'm not going to show it here. And it's the same thing for Android and for iOS. And please notice that there is a little bit difference between doing push notifications on Windows 8 C# application and Windows 8 JavaScript application. But luckily, both of them have samples here, so you don't need to worry about that. You just can follow the tutorials and get it done. And as I was explaining before, if you want to do the same stuff on Android or iOS, all of the same samples, they look a little bit different, but all of the same functionalities that you get out of the box with Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8 are on the Android and iOS samples. So this really enables you to create the backend easily. So, a little bit about logging. How many of you have done a great logging service on your API? Okay. So one of the things that you can always expect when you're creating a backend is that something will go wrong at some point. There will be mysterious errors. There will be something that's not working correctly. So one of the cool things on Windows Azure Mobile Services, it enables you very easily to write a log files. And also, it enables you to see how much API calls are you making, how much CPU time you're using, and how much data you're serving out. And these are things that it does out of the box. You don't need to do anything to do them. So let's go a little bit to the logging file. So by the default, of course, your logging file is empty. You don't have anything there. To write and log file, you have all of the spaces where you're doing the CRUD or schedules are the places where you can write the logging files. Also, now that our service has been up for a while, so now you can see, let's zoom it a little bit. Now you can see that it's already telling me that there is some kind of activity on this instance of the mobile services. So it's already sending data out, it's already serving the user, and you can see that it's up and running. And hopefully you have enabled the logging, so you can see if there is something wrong on the sample. So let's go to the scheduler a little bit. Yeah, sorry. Let me close these. Okay, so let's go to the scheduler to look like a little bit what the script looks like. So by the default, the only thing that your script does is it has a point where you can write your code, and it's running a console.warn that you're running empty schedule project. You probably should have your code here, do something. So I'm now going to run this once. And it takes a while to start it, about 10 to 15 seconds. After that, when you go to the logging log, you can see that it's writing the log messages here. They're in chronological order, and you can see the importances between different kind of errors right away from your log. Of course, you shouldn't write normal application started, user logged in, user did that on here. You should only put all of the errors to this place, so you can easily see, okay, there's an error, I should do something. And then log all of the other messages into some other services. Or if you want to log them all of the same ones, be sure which messages you put as warnings, which messages you put as errors, and which are just log messages. And now to show a little bit about that, what you can do with the same code base is that let's to the Windows 8.1. Yeah. So if you close the window, by default it's saying logging required. Please log in again. So I'm going to change that default functionality a bit. So first of all, I'm saying that reading a data doesn't require a locking. And then I'm going to show you that I will put so that inserting the data requires a locking. So you won't be able to insert the data without doing the locking. So let's first of all go here to the permissions, saying that only authenticated users can add data. An authenticated user is anyone with Facebook account. So it's not so safe, but the only thing that you know is that user is authenticated. Then that the read permission is anyone with the application key. I will just save that. Go to the C# side and remove the message so it's not saying that please log in. Oh, that's part 2. So now it's showing me the same login window. If I just go back from it and remove that line too. Sorry. So now if I go back, I can just, instead of opening the login window, I can just query the data. Now I'm going to show you the Windows 8, the Windows Phone 8 sample. So I'm downloading the Windows Phone 8 version of the project. So always the project comes in one zip file, so very easy to open. Yep. And this time I'm not going to edit anything. I'm just going to let it be as it was from the package. So it's now starting my emulator and opening the data. So currently, when I query the data, it will return the data. But when I try to update the data, it won't allow me to create new ones because I don't have the authentication enabled on this service. So also, if you want to enable different kinds of authentication, for example, if you want to enable all 4 of them, you can ask user on the start to choose which authentication he wants to use. But your application cannot automatically know which one you want to use. So by the default, the samples are using the Facebook locking. If you want to change them, basically there is option Facebook. You just change it to the Windows Live, and that's it. Or Twitter, or whatever you want to use. So now it's opening up. So it's showing me the data, but when I enter the data, it's not going to be able to enter the data because it's not enabled. And by default, there is no handler. There is no handler for the errors. So that's why it's giving me an error code and saying that you should write a handler to enable cases when you don't have authenticated users and you're still trying to access data that needs authentication. So now I'm going to go to the how to add authentication. And on the Windows Phone 8, it's very, very similar to the process on Windows 8. So because I have already done the Facebook thing, so I don't need to do that again. I only need to copy paste the code part. Yep. So I'm adding the authentication and then saying that whenever you start this application, please open the authentication. The The other way to do this is that you don't need to authenticate the user when the application open. You could authenticate the user whenever a user is trying to enter the data, and at that point show the authentication. So then the user knows that he can query the data even without registering, and if he wants to use the application fully and insert the data, then he needs to log in. So now I'm going to log in. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to skip the login because by default the Facebook login will show you your password here. So let's not do it this time. Very nice feature of the Facebook. So basically now we have created an application that's sharing the data between two different platforms. Now if you would want to add Android, then you would just download the Android sample. You would just download the Android sample here. It's the same kind zip file. You of course need to have the Android SDK installed, and Eclipse is used for the basic project. Then there is the same kind of samples. It's very, very similar. Only part that's different is the coding part. But as you can see, the same kinds of samples to enable Android. Enabling all of the major mobile platforms at the same time with the same backend has never been this easy. And you can enable the authentication, push notification very, very easily. So now, a little bit about how to integrate this into the more different kind of services. Because it's using the default authentication that anyone else, the other platforms can use, because you have the server logic, and because you are storing all of your data into default Azure database, you can integrate all of your services any way you want. So you can either use direct SQL connection to talk with the database, or you can use HTTP REST APIs to talk with the database, or you can use any of those mobile platforms to talk with all of your data. So it's really enabling you all different kinds of ways to handle, read, update, and delete the data. And one of the major things is that out of the box, all 4 platforms. Now if you want to create something that's not already here, for example, if you want to create a Windows Phone 7 application, or you want to create a BlackBerry application, you can easily find that all of the REST APIs that exist So all of the REST APIs that exist and are already used on the SDK can be used by yourself by any platform. So if you, for example, want to enable BlackBerry 10, or you want to enable S40 or Windows Phone 7, you can do it very easily yourself and get all of the benefits of the mobile services. Of course, there is no ready-made push notifications or anything because they're lacking from the platform, but the basic idea of sharing the data between major platforms already out of the box, no hassle, Very easy. Do you have any questions? I would gladly answer them. And I can tell you that everyone who asks a question will be rewarded very well. So I want at least 5 questions. Yeah.
Is there only the 3-month trial available for Azure currently? Or is there some free version with restrictions?
So the question is there only 3 months trial for Windows Azure currently? If you want for currently, the 3 months trial includes free time. After that, you need to pay for it. But because Windows Azure Mobile Services is free, you can keep on using it even after the 3 months trial. So basically, it's still free.
Then you only pay for the computing time?
Yeah. For the Windows Azure Mobile Services, if you're using the free instance, you get 3 hours a day for free. If you change it to the reserved mode, that's the only way when you need to start paying money for the service. If you keep it on the free mode, it's free.
Regarding the login, was there a way of getting that screen with all the logs that you had done before?
Okay, so how to get the log out of there, or put it on Excel or something?
But I guess it's possible.
Yeah, no. Currently, this is a preview version, and Microsoft is currently developing this very, very quickly. So one of the things that is currently major requests is that enable server-side scripting with C# and enable exporting all of the log messages out on CSV file. So it's pretty much coming hopefully soon. Yeah?
Is there any way to back up the data?
So is there any way to back up the data? So the data is stored on default SQL Azure database. So you can back up that as a default one, as you would back up any SQL Azure database. The hard part is that currently the scripts which reside on the Windows Azure Mobile Services are not stored on the database. So if you want to back up the scripts currently, you need to do it manually.
Does that Azure handle itself that if user has like Android phone or Windows phone, that push notification is going the right way? Is it always the same function that does the push notification to the phone, or does it differ between platforms?
So the question was, does the Azure handle that the right people get the right notifications? So if user has Windows Phone, Android or iPhone, that they get the right push notifications. The question is, you need to handle it yourself. But the idea is that when you want to enable the push notifications, you need to anyway gather the data from the user, how to send them, all of the details, who to send the push notifications. And those are a little bit different between Android and Windows Phone and iPhone. So you need to, anyway, I suggest storing them on the different kind of, different tables. And whenever you are doing your push notification, your script knows that when I get data from Windows Phone push notification table, I send the push notification for Windows Phone to those guys. And when I get the data from Windows 8 push notifications, I send the Windows 8 push notifications for those guys. So they're all a bit different. And then just to make it a little bit easier, even for Windows Phone, there is 20 different kinds of push notifications, depending on the tile size and animations and things like that. Azure takes care of that automatically, but not the cross-platform thing. But there is very good samples how to do it with cross-platform and all of them at the same time. So it's very, very easy.
It's hard to migrate the WCF service into mobile services.
So is it hard to migrate WVCF service to mobile services? It depends. If you have server logic, you need to transfer your server logic from C# to JavaScript. So I don't know if that's hard or not, but it's work at least. But other than that, no, it's pretty straightforward. Also, the one way you can do it is that on the Windows Azure Mobile Services, you can query your VCF service and get the data back, and then use your VCF service to power your mobile services. So if you have some logic that you just cannot transfer like that to the mobile services, you can still use it that way.
Can I use the data for Windows Phone 8 and Windows 8 at the same time as your mobile services?
So can you use it same time for multiple platforms? Yeah. Yeah, so if I would have all of the 4 devices here, and I would save it on the first one, and then refresh on the others would see it. When I save it on other ones, the others would see it. So it doesn't matter which device you use to save it. And all of the push notifications work at the same time. All of the authentication works at the same time. So it works same time for all of the platforms at once. That's the whole beauty of the platform. Any other questions? If not, then I would like to thank you. And those guys who asked questions, please come to here, and I will give you something nice.